guys, this is Sid Patel, your host. Welcome to the Wine, Whiskey and Weed Show. I'm here with Akshita Singh. She's an associate at one of the leading law firms in Chicago, who also specialize in cannabis. So we're going to talk about basic cannabis 101 law here. I think mainly want to focus on international companies trying to enter US as well. So Akshita, let's spend some knowledge out here. So welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself to our audience.
Of course. Thank you so much, Sid, for having me here today. I'm honored. My name's Akshita. Like Sid mentioned, I'm currently attorney at Dickinson Wright, which is headquartered in Michigan, and currently I'm in their office in Chicago. I am a second-year associate. I have been in cannabis since probably 2017. I started as an intern at Cresco Labs, which is an MSO, which is a multi-state operator. And I spent about 2 years there. And then I shifted towards a law firm called Lock Lord, and they were building their cannabis practice then. When I first started at Cresco, it was just medical. And then when I went to Lock Lord, it just became recreational. So cannabis was really picking up, especially in the legal industry. And then as soon as law school ended and I took the bar, I ended up joining Dickinson Wright in their cannabis regulatory practice. And now, cannabis has become a huge part of the legal industry, so it just doesn't touch regulatory. So now I've been doing banking, regulatory work. I try to stay away from real estate. It's not my favorite. So if you're hearing this and you love real estate, and then a little bit of M&A. So that's kind of like how my career has developed. And I've been enjoying it and I've been loving it, and I continue to still be in the industry.
Super. And what did you have to study, or it's a basic law thing and then you selected cannabis as an intern, or was it part of the curriculum as well?
No, that's a good question. So cannabis has started showing up in maybe some legal classes now, especially in law school. My last semester that I was there, we did have a cannabis law class. But what's funny is, like, back in the day when I started, that it was kind of like a hush hush situation. Like, oh, are you sure you want to do cannabis? Like, how is it going to look on your resume? Like, I'm originally from Texas. What is that going to look like? The nation was still a little hesitant. So now where we are and what I've seen has developed what it is today, and how everyone wants a piece of the pie now, has been really awesome to see.
And what do you specialize in? What's sort of your, day look like, and really what kind of subject matter are you really expert in your firm?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So before, with the two previous jobs I had at Cresco and Lock Lord, I think it was based heavily on applications, a lot of regulatory work, compliance when it comes to advertising, marketing, just having correct documents with regulators, making those relationships. And then now my practice has really shifted mainly on my own virtue. Being a good attorney, is to be able to spread your wings out wide. So I love a little bit of the banking, that interests me. I do like M&A. I do a lot of securities work now. So I've kind of expanded, but the cool part is a lot of it is still cannabis companies. Cannabis companies need everything these days besides just regulatory work. So, it will be a banking deal, but it'll be a cannabis client. It could be M&A, but it's a cannabis client. So regardless of just focusing on the regulatory, I've kind of expanded it beyond that.
Sure, great. So let's go right into something like if I wanted to set up the cannabis company, right? If I'm a local, we can divide this. One for international companies who is maybe an international citizen would be a right word. Trying to set up a company in US, and I'm sure, maybe every state has a different law, for setups for cannabis companies. And then one scenario you can give us, for a green card holder or a US citizen trying to set up a company. So what kind of processes are we looking at here?
Of course. So really good question. Both are kind of going to be in the same realm. So with international businesses, you have to know that at the end of the day, this is still federally illegal. So you're going to skip that part and just go straight to the states. You're going to figure out what state you want to apply in. So if you're an already existing cannabis company that's an international that has a parent company on international grounds, then the first thing you're going to find is counsel in the state where you want to apply. Or even if you want to acquire, you're going to need an entity in that state. Like you already mentioned in your question, everything's super state specific. So you want to do your research and figuring out what state, if there's licenses available, can you acquire, details beyond that, do your research. And then you want to set up an entity, find local counsel, set up your entity from there. Whether that's an LLC, corporation, things like that, I'd advise, getting compliance or an attorney to advise on that.
I thought that foreign citizens cannot own a cannabis company, so they can, is it?
That's a good question. So there is a little shift in the industry now. So a lot of states have had a requirement in their application saying that you have some type of residency requirement. I think that's what you're referring to. So
yeah, like alcohol, a little bit, it's like you have to do this police clearance and all that other stuff.
Yeah. So with cannabis, you don't have to do that, but you would have to in the application in order to win, or if it's a merit-based application, let's say Illinois. So Illinois was saying that you had to be an Illinois resident for the past 5 years.
Okay.
So that's a residency requirement. But there has been some turn, I would say, in Troy, Michigan and Maine. Courts are looking at this and turning it, saying that you can't force to have residency requirements because it goes against the constitutional law that we have that says it's against the dormant commerce clause, which means that we can't favor our in-state and push out out-of-state residents.
And are there solutions to this? Like usually, accounting firms or legal firms take one person and be a partner if they're a residing company, and then 99% can be, let's say, a UK citizen or an Australian guy sitting there. Are there solutions for this?
Absolutely. And that happens quite often. So, going beyond that, going back to the question of how to do that, the second step I would suggest, after you figure out where to find a local partner and vet them. That is absolutely important. The industry is brand new and it's still developing. Everyone comes from different paths. We're all just trying to build this together. You want to vet your partner, because if you're on international grounds and you have a state that you're applying and your partner actually lives there and is doing all, the local work, whether it's lobbying or making those connections, you want to have a good partner, Yeah.
And I think there is a lot of maybe you can correct, you can help me here. I'm sure there is a lot of monthly compliance like alcohol where you have to file in reports, and so you will need someone ongoing for taking care of those kind of filings, right? Like your taxes and other kind of special cannabis filings.
Absolutely, because it's so highly regulated, and I'm sure you can attest to this with alcohol, that everything you do is pretty much reported to the government, all the regulators. So anything in Illinois, if your ownership changes, if you get employees, they have to be badged a little bit. If you get new investors, if you get new equity or debt you're given out, that everything is reported. So that's my favorite part, is constant compliance and just constantly, updating and being on top of it. With a disclaimer, things are constantly changing, right? This isn't set law. So to really have your team or your experts or legal counsel to be there and show you when laws change and to guide you as you go through it.
Got it. One of the themes, we have added in this year's, one of the pillars in Cannabis Drinks Expo for 2023 is sort of expanding it to international theme and attracting CBD companies around the world to enter USA, right? And a lot of people ask me that this and that. So I have some questions. I thought, let me just ask you live here, right? So one of the question which I assumed maybe a myth or was that a law for an Australian CBD brand coming to Illinois would be same as a brand from, let's say, California coming to Illinois, because it's just state specific end of the day. So the rules for anyone out of the state are the same. So how does that work? Let's say an Australian CBD brand want to find a co-packer in Illinois versus a Californian brand looking to enter.
Of course, no. So as long as, there's no that, like we were talking about, usually in CBD, there isn't those residency requirements, and CBD is a little lax because it's federally legal now because hemp is legal. So you're able to, like any international brand, like how a lot of American companies go out and set up, at the end of the day, it's just business law. And so being able to just set that entity up, following the state requirements, filing those fees, getting your owners, disclosures, the exact same thing.
So CBD is like normal business, but THC has different rules, right? So what's that?
Yeah, so like I was saying, so it depends on what state. I'm an expert, and I would say in Illinois. So Illinois was a merit-based application, but they only had certain windows where you could apply. So we don't have like, oh, all year long you can apply. So you would have to figure out when the application is released, apply
even for
it.
The brands, even on the supply side. I thought it's just dispensary side.
Nope, everything. A to Z. So it's called vertical integration. When you start with cultivation, processing, and dispensary, that's how, like, think of it like you're growing it, you're processing it, and then you're giving it to the dispensary. All of those have to be licensed and approved and awarded. And then on top of that, even transportation now. You have to have a license if you want to even transport to each one of those.
Yeah, no, I get it. But there is no like bottleneck to the number of applications for if I want to open a trucking company or a warehouse or a private label brand. I can, right? Like immediately. I don't have to wait like dispensaries, like a lottery system or something.
Are you talking about specifically just growing THC cannabis itself?
Let's say, particularly talking about an exact case of a private label THC brand, which has THC in it, like a cannabis beverage, pretty much, from Germany, for example, wants to enter Illinois. What would be the requirement for that?
Got it. No, that makes sense. So a lot of those, I think we're going to touch on this later, is co-packing agreements. So as long as they're not the ones touching the actual THC, because that's a separate category. But like I said, if you're the brand and you're the party A in that agreement, yes, absolutely. Start your warehouse, set up shop. And then you're just going to have to partner with the companies to be able to actually infuse or process, like you said, in a beverage company. So you have your brand ready, you have all the advertisement, you know how you want to market it. Here, you just have to have that co-packing agreement and then be able to create that partnership and then have that company, party B, in that situation actually go sell the product for you.
Got it. Cool. We'll touch base on that after a couple of questions. Let's go on the agreements side, right? Like, I think that's what really, lawyers are for, to draft that amazing agreement. What are the tips you would give, in drafting, or maybe 5 important points you must cover, in any sort of cannabis agreement? Can be between a supplier and a brand, or usually, co-packer part is more interesting to sort of our community. But please give us some limelight on some standard SOPs for an agreement.
Yeah, no, of course. Okay, so the first one I would say is all or most of your contracts should be subject to regulatory approval. So usually on the business aspect, we see business decisions are already happening before they come to attorneys, which is great. And so let's say we have party A and party B, and we'll use co-packing in this instance to make it easier. So party A would be your brand and party B would be your co-packer, so the one holding the license. So they come together, they can make their business decision. But then when they come to the legal side of it, and we actually need to draft that agreement, usually, I'm not saying all the time, but it's subject to state approval. Their state wants to say everything on who has ownership, what type of ownership, what threshold, what's going on, your brand, your advertising, that's going to be approved, right? You can have your business decision and you have that beverage, but what you put on it, what you label it, how much THC, everything needs to go through the regulatory approval.
So even the agreement has to be submitted to the state, like the partnership agreement?
Whether it's the exact agreement itself or some type of, version of it or some type of summary, but usually, yes.
Got it.
Like government, depending on each state, but government, the regulatory approval is very important. So as these decisions are going on, that subject to regulatory approval language in a clause is extremely important. So you don't sign up for agreement, and let's say if it doesn't get approved or it takes a while to get approved, you're not, paying those fees like immediately. Yeah. So that would be number one. Number two, because, those business decisions are happening before it hits market, an NDA is always nice to have. So a non-disclosure to make sure, you know, that whenever information is exchanged and it's confidential between the two parties as the business decisions are going on, that, you know, no information is leaked. I would say that the cannabis industry is still quite small, and there's only a handful of big players. And especially if you're a smaller company, you want to protect your information, I would say. Yeah. And
so
then,
on that, if you don't mind, one of the follow-up on detail, which you can explain, is how to solve that problem. I was talking with one of the, let's say, companies like Vertosa, right? Like, who are in the making part and the formulation part. So one of the problems they have is, you know, the bottling and the packers are usually the volume game. So for them, it's like really get more stuff out. But the brand owner wants to make sure the quality is protected. And the IP and everything is protected. So how do you I mean, if it's not your point too, I think that's what you meant. Like, how do you go detail, like couple of clauses, couple of sentences that come to mind that can sort of protect the quality of that brand owner?
Yeah, I love this question. I was just about to go into this. So we're both thinking on the same. So yeah, quality control or process is very important, especially in these co-packing agreements, because like you said, you know, that co-packer, I mean, that brand could be Party A, it could be an international one, right? But you want to have an agreement with your co-packer. You know, direct clauses, like they would have to figure out with the business itself, but whether that means, you know, an on-site approval or a constant working relationship, or before any material change happens, they have that approval. You know, as what we're hearing, the trend is customers are very picky, and if you get a bad name or bad reputation straight from the beginning, that is very harmful, because like I said, the industry is very small. Your customers are particular on what they like, and one bad instance with the product could, you know, ruin the image for that customer. So quality control and quality process is extremely important in the agreement. You would want some type of ownership or control, I would say. You wouldn't have like percentage ownership, but you would have some type of control or authority that gives you that able to, you know, have approval, have employees come approve, or constant checks or sale requirements, you know, sale reports, anything like that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool. I think, is that your 2 points or 3?
3. And then the only other one I have is, like I said, so you want to have any clauses that avoid giving too much control. So in these co-packing agreements, let's say like you have to think about it like, so Party A is a brand and Party B is a co-packer. And so you're licensing some part of your brand, right, for them to co-pack it. And you're giving the Party A a fee. You're giving them like a management fee or, you know, some type of control. And you don't want any instances where control can shift or is a little too lax, because once control starts shifting, or the brand starts getting more control of your, you know, your process and how you grow and things like that, that's all subject to regulatory approval. So depending on the threshold, I'll give you an example. Michigan now has capped your management fees at 10%. If you exceed 10%, now you have, they think it's like now you have some type of control, and you're going to have to go through extra process of having your brand get approved, having their owners be approved, more regulatory approval. So you want to make sure in these contracts that you're not giving up too much control as a co-packer.
And the thing that you just said, 10% of the management fee, are this for listed companies or even for any company in cannabis?
And so for Michigan, for now, it's any company in cannabis. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. And those are all management service agreements. So it has been a big change. But that's something that clients should be very mindful of before going into the agreements, to, like I said, go back to your counsel, make sure everything is checked off, look at your contracts properly, and look at regulatory approval.
What kind of issues that you see constantly coming, you know, because that tells me that these are the common mistakes that people are making, right? What are like 5 or 6 common sort of clients coming up with, I'm in this problem?
Yeah, no, specifically in agreements is what you're talking about, or yeah.
Overall, just like, 5 biggest common problems that people come
Yeah.
to your door with.
I think I can sum those 5 into one is not involving legal or compliance from the beginning. So I, not to praise myself here or all the people, all the colleagues I work with, but because it's so regulated and because it's so is dependent on, relationships and approval and law constantly changing, getting legal or compliance involved from the get-go is going to set you up for success. And that is a common mistake I've seen, whether it's working while I was working at a company or, I've seen on the other side being outside counsel, is that everyone always comes to us when there's a problem or it wasn't approved. But, with cannabis, it's, a fast-paced industry, but it also requires a lot of, like I said, approval from governmental bodies. And you need to give them time and space to be able to approve this. So you're not wasting money. You're not spending time on the business side. And that's the biggest, mistake I've seen. So
Got it. Let's go a little deeper into some problems, just as you said, like they come up with problems, just like 3 or 4. So that way there is an actual subject matter to understand what kind of problems are there.
Of course. So I always enjoy a lot of the compliance of, owners or employees or badging them. So I've seen biggest mistakes that companies, especially when they start, take on new owners, new employees, overpromise, but you have to, all of that subject to regulatory approval. So you should be vetting everyone before they even get to that. For example, so Illinois requires a lot of background checks, fingerprinting. They require, criminal records and a lot of disclosure. So before, as a business, if you're on the business side and you're on the management team, before you bring that person on, you should do your due diligence in vetting everything about them. So when you bring it to legal and they're just able to file this and get it approved. Because the worst thing you could do in any regulated industry is disclose something and then retract from it. You want everything out on the table. You want, all the information out in the beginning, because you don't want to say that I certify this is correct and proper. And then, your employer owner comes back to you and said, oh, shoot, I forgot to tell you this, I was arrested here, this, then, and when, or I didn't file my taxes, or I wasn't, I owe alimony here. And that can all be avoidable, if you're able to vet your partners and employees ahead of time.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's a good one. What about, logistical issues or any product damage issues? Does that sort of things come to your table?
Definitely. And so that comes a lot of what I was saying, the relationship aspect. In the beginning, when I was in 2017, everyone only had 1 or 2 players they would work with, whether it's construction, like you're talking about, or product or cultivation, having these people. Now, it's become a bigger industry. I think people are floating around more. So, the mistakes I've seen then is people getting too hasty and then getting in a contract that they quickly want to, or getting in a lease that they want to because they think it's right. And our biggest advice is always that this relationship you're going to have with this person is going to be long-term, even as so far as having local relationships, because sometimes when you're getting real estate and it's a local government, they have to approve it. You have to go to their hearing. You have to convince them, hey, I want to set up shop here. I want to have my cannabis dispensary here. It's going to be profitable for your city for this X, Y, and Z reason. And slowing down is logistic wise, great. Getting counsel involved, vetting your partners, creating that relationships, asking the hard-hitting questions. How long have they done this? What have they done? What are your stats? How often, have things fallen through? Getting that, getting on the front end of that is, would set you up for less logistical issues later on.
Got it. I think it's obviously we can see a lot of entrepreneurship DNA in cannabis these days, because it's just, a lot of people want to get, and usually it's entrepreneurs, right? And usually they don't have patience. They will just try their own ways and do it. And I think that's what you're saying, that go, slowing down is a better thing, because the long term is, and it's actually, you're always under the lens, right? So it's better to craft it properly. Great. So I think let's go on starting a business, right? So one of the things which I really wanted to ask was also for US companies, if there are any good states that they can practice on, or easier, which you would advise to start there, and why, and maybe 2 or 3 complicated states where you advise that maybe do that later.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So I think it just comes down to preference, but I'll give you mine in this sense. So a lot of states were doing merit-based applications, which means that it was a competitive application. You apply, you pull a team together, and you want to get the most points possible. I see this trend kind of going away, and a lot of like acquisitions are happening now because states have already given their licenses out. They're with, the current holders. So a lot of acquisitions, depending on what state and acquisitions are allowed and when ownership can change, they might have limits like that. You want to do research. I would say overall, California is a tougher state. There's a lot of players. They gave out a lot of licenses. There's pretty much no cap. There's no like statewide regulation. There is a minimum, but really it comes down to local and city governments. And so sometimes I think that's a little more difficult to handle, because if you want to set up multiple dispensaries or multiple shops or multiple cultivations, you're going to have to go to each local authority, follow their application, their rules, still get state approval, convince them, pay fees, and do that multiple times as many as you want. So
true. I think I personally have a very small experience in this, but let's say we do event in South San Francisco, cannabis, and then we do in this Chicago area and Midwest, right? Literally, Chicago is so easy and so and over there, like we got to have cops at our show, and all that other laws are there, right? So you're
Absolutely.
right. And it's nothing to do with the San Francisco or California. It's literally that particular South San Francisco has different laws.
Exactly. Getting, I'm not an expert in California cannabis law. I mean, because it goes down what you're saying, it goes down to the nitty gritty, and, good counsel that's aware, and then really, cultivating those relationships. But California, I would say, is a tougher state overall. You're really hard. Applications could be strict, depending on how many applicants there are and how many licenses. That could be tough, because everyone is going to put their best application. It's like the A student, right? We're all going to work hard. We're all going to do this. We're going to pay a lot of money, and we're going to get the most help, and we're going to submit it. But if there's only a certain number of licenses, what are you going to do?
Now, I think now it makes sense that why these valuations are crazy in cannabis. It's because of actually the supply is controlled and the license value is so much. It's like New Jersey liquor stores, right? Versus New York liquor stores, pretty much. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Got it. It's just, so it's not really on the P&L activity, but it's usually, okay, if California license is so hard to get, the valuation of that company goes up versus maybe Illinois, let's say.
Absolutely. Yep.
What are the 2 or 3 nice new states for you would advise easier compliance wise, which are opening up on East Coast? What's your view on New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts?
Okay, so I would say New Jersey so far has been doing a decent job. I think the problem is finding, it comes down to finding real estate in local jurisdictions, because you need that to be, so every state is different, but in New Jersey, you need that before you submit your state application. Otherwise, I think guidelines and having accessibility to your regulators, asking questions, all the information is beautifully laid out on their website. They have a lot of FAQs. It's ongoing, which is good. So it's not like a strict deadline. I love all of that about New Jersey. I think they're doing a fantastic job so far. I think it just comes down to, because New Jersey, right, it's a smaller state, really highly populated, it's getting that approval, finding that warehouse, finding that storefront, going to the local authorities, asking them, telling them why this is good for you. And I've seen more than often a lot of rejections in that stage. So I think the state is still doing a good job. I think it just comes down to convincing those smaller cities and towns.
Got it. So one last question, before we wind up, about the international brands, right? I think trying to enter in US, any tips or any pointers, any clarifications for them?
Of course, I'm gonna hand that question back to vet your partners. You're gonna need a lot of help, especially for an international brand. Laws are different. Even between local council here, your laws are different. Like you were saying, Illinois versus Ohio versus Pennsylvania versus California. I'm going to toot my horn, finding a good law firm that has accessibility in multiple offices in different
So
nations.
how do you said vet your partners? Let's say, I want to do business with you. Let's say, how do I vet? What is the process? Are there any tips for, apart from the Dun & Bradstreet score and all that basic stuff, how do you actually vet a company?
Yeah. So when you, it's a lot of owners, when they apply, you have to disclose a lot of personal information. So depending on, laws keep changing. Michigan was really strict back in the day that you had to do your disclosure of your financial statements for like 5-6 years. You would also do your spouse's. So it goes to that extent. So depending on what state, like the basic, that you should vet, did they pay their taxes? Do they own any child support or alimony? What is their criminal record? What experience do they have in the industry? How does their resume fit into the application? Do they have more contacts and a good team out here? Do they have real estate? Do they have real estate connections? So, instead of just saying, oh, you have a lot of money and let's make this partnership, I would say you should ask those hard-hitting questions from the beginning. Like if I was looking at, like you're saying, if you were vetting me, I would want you to ask me to be like X, Y, and Z. Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Okay, we'll move forward.
Got it. No, those are good points. Sorry, I keep interrupting you, but you were saying the other part. What other tips were there for international brands, trying to come here?
Yeah. So same thing. So looking at, I would say, finding the states that you want to hold a long-term relationship with too, right? Because this isn't just, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of investment, it's a lot of money. So if you're an international brand, really, most of this information is available online, like on websites. You don't need to dig any further than that. You can search, you can go read the bill yourself or the regulations, do a quick overview. Does this fit your requirements? Another thing that I didn't point out earlier, some states limit, if you can do flower or if you can do pre-rolls or if you can do that type of product. If that's important to you, then you should figure out, does that state let me do that?
True. Like if the whole portfolio, your product extensions and future, what's true.
Yeah, exactly. And then even medical versus rec, right? I think that's a big difference. Personally, like if it was me, I would want to be in a state that offers both. I think that expands your business a lot in a more expansive state, but a lot of businesses just do medical, which is great. I think there's a really good market in medical because that's the only thing they're offering. And then there's been an influx of medical patients that are going to come to your dispensaries. They're going to be constant users. Unlike rec, it might be one or two. So your medical industry is still very huge. So to figure out that, or to figure out if it's just medical, is there hopes for it to go recreational, and things like that. So if I was an international brand, I would do my research ahead of time on what you want.
And minimum requirements, like, as I said to the previous question, I just want to make sure I understood correctly. A German brand or an Australian brand, which may have THC, let's say any country which allows THC, want to expand in Illinois versus an Oregon or a Californian or a Colorado brand, are the rules exactly same for anyone outside?
So are you saying, so let's say if this German brand comes to Illinois and versus coming to Oregon on how they want to
No, I'm saying if a German brand XYZ comes to Illinois versus same brand in Oregon coming in Illinois, and both trying to enter and looking for co-packers and whatnot, are the rules exactly the same for them?
Yeah, pretty much. Yep. You just want to set up your LLC. Like you don't have to, you know, go a lot further than that. You're not like, you don't have to go through some special federal or even state requirement that it's international. Like
Okay.
you can definitely live, we have, I mean, the most common is Canada, right? So Canada is federally legal and
Yeah.
America is still federally illegal. And so we have a lot of partnerships with Canadian brands.
So
Canadian
what's
brands.
this deal? Just some fun question. What's this deal with, what's the scam, Canada? Like, what's this deal with whole, I thought that it's all mainly money is legally raised there. So usually people set up there because, you know, the federally money issue was there in US, right? Like, I think, I don't know, but it's mainly to raise money. People set up companies there.
So if you're a Canadian brand and your parent company is in Canada, is that what you're saying? And
Just saying, like, I just see US operations, but the companies, it's like Delaware thing, you know, I just see companies in Canada, you know, but the 90% of the business is in US.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like you said, it's just a money thing. Like if they can expand, Canada, I don't know too much about Canada law, but I do know they obviously went federally a lot earlier than us. And for some reason, the money's here, right? Like they want to come here, like they can set up. And the cool thing is for them is that they can be on the American Stock Exchange because they're a Canadian company.
Wow. Whoa.
So they're also on our stock exchange. They're also having shop
That's so
here.
funny. And US companies cannot be on that.
They can't be on American, but they can be in Canadian.
Got it.
Yeah. So yeah, it just comes down to money. You know, it's they want to expand, and I think sometimes when you limit, I mean, and people will argue this in the industry that because it's not federally legal yet, that having that, you know, limited amount of players and having limited amount of access to like medical patients and kind of building your way, you're making a lot more money there than if it's like alcohol and it's legal, then everyone has shop, right? Everyone can set up. So the people that are in the industry right now are, you know, are tending to do very well.
Super. So thanks a lot, Akshita. Any other closing remarks for, you know, our potential clients out there?
You know, that's it. I can just you know, really emphasize on compliance for legal and getting them involved in the beginning. It's a highly regulated industry, and to just keep vetting your partners and start cultivating those relationships, whether you're an existing brand or you're trying to break into the industry.